Senator Mark Hatfield, a Republican from Oregon, and Senator George McGovern, a Democrat from South Dakota, got together to create the McGovern-Hatfield Amendment that would have ended the United States participation in the war. It would have first off stopped all military actions that year, and the next year would have withdrawn all troops. So it was a sweeping amendment. They knew they couldn't introduce it as a piece of legislation, so they put it on as an amendment to an appropriations bill that was eventually going to pass, and so they thought they had a chance that way. But they had to develop American support. The day that they introduced that amendment, April 30th, 1970, that night, President Nixon went on television, on national television, and announced that he was authorizing American troops in Cambodia to attack nest enclaves of Vietnamese.
In cooperation with the armed forces of South Vietnam, attacks are being launched this week to clean out major enemy sanctuaries on the Cambodian-Vietnam border.
And so this was a huge step forward, escalation of the war, and all hell broke out on American campuses. There were demonstrations on even the most conservative campuses had demonstrations at this time. But the most dramatic, the most tragic took place at Kent State just a few days after Nixon's announcement, when National Guardsmen fired on and killed students on the campus. And then about a week later, there was a similar shooting at Jackson State in Mississippi. So this was a really tragic moment. There were 100,000 people marched on Washington to protest at this stage. The senators felt that the president could get airtime anytime he wanted it. He could, make these announcements to the public, but they couldn't respond. And of course, there was no C-SPAN in the chamber at that stage. And so if you were lucky enough to be on the news, it was just for a minute or two in the night, or maybe you get on the Sunday morning news programs. But essentially, they wanted a chance to respond. And so they went to the Federal Communications Commission and asked for equal time. They wanted free time on national television to respond to the president. The FCC wouldn't grant that. So they basically took out a $60,000 loan, and they purchased a half an hour's time on NBC. And it broadcast on the evening of May the 12th, 1970 at 7:30, right after the news, although it was up against Walter Cronkite's news on CBS at that time. And they made that program.
But the point is simply this: it's no longer the opinion of presidents and no longer the opinion of senators. It's the evidence of history, of over 40,000 deaths and this amount of resource expended that has proven each one of those escalations to be wrong. And I say, how many more American men have to be heaped upon that funeral pyre of war to disprove a theory or a doctrine of military action that has been proven wrong each time that has been acted upon?
After all, the United States is not going to impose any permanent solution in Asia to settle Asian problems among Asian people on the Asian mainland. Now, the idea that we are going to do that runs against the whole current of history.